So hi everybody, this is Jill Hurston with CynerZip. Welcome to episode 7 of ZipChat. We're happy to have you join us today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our ZipChat host, Mike Watson. He is the VP of Engineering at CynerZip. So Mike, I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate it. So yes, today our topic for ZipChat episode 7 is challenges in adopting serverless technology, or serverless in AWS, however you want to look at that. I'm very excited about this topic. It's something that was introduced to me maybe a year and a half ago at a conference where I got to see Ben Kehoe speak on this topic and how serverless is more than just an infrastructure play. It's a mindset and how to build software. So anyway, so now 18 months later or so, here we are coming together. I've had the opportunity to work on a project with serverless with some of the folks on this call, and I'm excited to chat about it. So like Jill said, ZipChat is a casual format. It's more of we're just going to sort of rap about what we feel about serverless and how we think maybe y'all can benefit from it. And with that, I'm going to jump right into it. But first, let me introduce my panelists. Philip Edge, he's the VP of Engineering and CSO at Intertech Alchemy. We also have Matt Griffin. He's the Chief Architect at Intertech Alchemy. And then from AWS, we have Gandhi Reketla. Sorry, Gandhi. He's solutions architect at AWS and quite knowledgeable in AWS service offerings. So let's begin. I'm going to start by asking Gandhi a question here. Actually, let's start with a poll. How about we do that? So the poll topic is, how far down the serverless rabbit hole is your organization? So here we're just trying to gauge, who's got the experience, how much experience you have, which will help us down the road here. So take a few minutes to answer that.
Mike, it looks like just about everyone has voted, so I'm going to close the poll and show you the results.
Perfect. All right, so let's look at these results. So it looks like what I would expect. Everyone's dabbling in serverless. Some people are all the way to fully bought in, which is awesome. And then, somewhat small number of not using quite yet. Hopefully we can convince you that it's a way to go, and maybe we can get more into that we're dabbling in it category. All right, so Gandhi, why don't you tell us a little bit about why an organization should start thinking about serverless?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So one other thing, let me take a step back and see how the application's role is changing in organizations in the last 20 years. From the time where an application is just like a utility, where people used to use an application for utility, it is now more of a business function itself. You have applications and apps which part of the core revenue generation for any enterprise. So with this in mind, what is more important is you need to have a quick time to market, you have to bring agility, and you need to have the competitive edge where you can bring in the new features and functionalities which the customer wants in the constant market change. That's what serverless strategy enables you. You need to look at a serverless strategy where you are actually moving away from managing a lot of your operational responsibilities to a development. More time you are spending on operational responsibilities, you have less time to manage your development of your application or product. That's what serverless strategy is enabling you, shifting you from doing a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting, you're doing patching, your development tools, your configuration management, your debugging tools, your CI/CD tools. Yeah, there are a host of tools which you maintain and manage for as part of the development process. What we are trying to do here is going away from that, offloading that task to the cloud providers who has got expertise in managing that, and you as a core business function focusing on developing core app product, which would actually truly differentiate you from your competitors. That's what you need to look into the serverless strategy is how one of the first thing you look into is, one of the big advantage you look when you actually move to a strategy is how I'm taking away my operation responsibilities and then focusing on my core development tasks so that I bring some agility in my product development, I bring innovation, there's a quick time to market, and then I will be able to release new functions and features which are required for my customers, more often.
Yeah, that makes sense, Gandhi. In fact, one of the things that really triggered in my head about why the serverless mentality was a good idea is because so much of the code that we could write is commoditized, right? It's code that's already been built by someone who's really good at it. So why would we reinvest in that? Which is against the, we invented it here kind of mentality that developers love. But, from a business standpoint, really diving into your core value, like you mentioned, seems like the right thing to do. So also, Gandhi, what considerations should an organization make when they're moving to serverless? Like, is there any barrier there? How do you look at that?
Okay, the moment you move to the serverless, basically the way you function, basically the way your business functions, the way you interact applications changes. As I told previously, like just now, like when you move your when you're actually offering some of your operation responsibilities to the basic cloud providers, the overall with serverless, you are adopting like new application architecture, which is more triggered by event, and then you are rethinking how you store your state. You are also thinking about how you operate an application. So in nutshell, if you see, a serverless architecture looks a lot like a three-tier architecture, which we have been doing all this while, but there are some elements like data, logic, the presentation layer. There are some key differences here. Let's look into what all the differences which you see in the basic serverless versus the regular traditional applications. So first thing is modularity. So when we are looking at, there is a single microservice, you have a specific function which is designed to do a specific task, and then even that function is designed to improve scalability and resilience. Second thing which is that the way things work differently is your integration communication. So we are just not using in-process communication between the different functions and methods and procedures. Here we're using a combination of events, messages, and queues that enables the communication within the microservice and API to communicate with services. And third important thing is a purpose-built data strategy. There was a time where we used to have one single database which can do everything. From there, we are moving from rather a single database. You can choose a data store that best fit for a business. For example, in a single e-commerce page, you could have 10 different serverless functions. One function could be pulling the data from a catalog, which it might be using a NoSQL database. Another service might be pulling the data from customer preferences, maybe from a graph database. Other could be user preferences. Other could be some doing inventory transactions from a regular relational database. So you could have a database, a right tool for a right job. You are using a right database for a right purpose. You are not just using one database which could do everything. And third and most important thing is that, again, I'm coming back to the operation, stressing again is an operation. So in traditional application, there's a one release pipeline. You share with many teams. The process often introduces like bottlenecks, which is why, when we decompose the functional hierarchies, that gives team more autonomy, like which team has authority to move fast. They can release the new functions continuously without having to wait for other teams. So if I summarize this, a serverless technology is actually enabling you to build some of these modern applications. So these are all typical characteristics of a modern application. Even we could use a term interesting like microservice or modern application. End of the day, what is more required is you are bringing a modularity. The communication between the services is changing. The data strategy is changing. The operation strategy is changing. And then one of the most important thing is that the state, an important consideration if you're writing a serverless functions or containers.
Yeah, sounds good. Does that resonate with you, Philip and Matt? In terms of approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, our journey began last year when we were developing a brand new product. It was an app. It was going to be device agnostic, so it had to work on Android, Windows, and iOS. And while we were architecting that product, we knew that it had to have an integration back to the main application. Also, some of the features along with that product or that app had to scale behind the scenes. I mean, to Gandhi's point, if you look at serverless and what it's really good at doing in terms of taking the headaches of worrying about, do I have to right size a server and so forth, that's really where it resonated with us, because we went into the project looking at AWS with services like S3, API Gateway, elemental media converter, SNS, you name it. We knew we were going to leverage those services. But on top of that, we knew that a lot of the back-end processing that we were going to build, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So using technologies like Node.js and Lambdas really resonated with us in terms of what we knew the application had to do on the back end to really fulfill what we were trying to achieve from a product perspective. So with that, we knew that once we understood what Lambda could do for us, we were off to the races. There was no turning back for us with respect to serverless and bridging a lot of those integration gaps with what AWS offers today.
Yeah, we really could see all the benefits that Gandhi was talking about. Like you spend the time writing your code, you're not provisioning servers. You don't have to wait for a server to get provisioned. It's all infrastructure as code. It scales with the usage, especially if you're using the serverless, all the serverless features within AWS. You're not paying for any idle time. It's highly available and fault tolerant, kind of built in. I mean, sometimes you need to design that in to the way that your infrastructure is set up. But for the most part, all the Lambdas and things like DynamoDB, they just come with all of that built in. You don't have to put your effort there. It just kind of comes with that. So, it gives us, our developers each can have their own production environment. It's not like a production-like environment. It's a clone of production. And so that way they're focusing on the app and not, it works on my machine or it worked in dev. It's the same environment for the whole thing. And those are, we really jumped right in and thought that was the path for us going forward.
Yeah, and it definitely gives your engineers. Oh, go ahead, Gandhi.
Oh, sorry, Phil. Go ahead. Maybe I thought of that.
No, I was going to say, to piggyback off of that, it really gives the developers more ownership with what they're developing at the end of the day, which was a big eye opener for us because, traditionally you have, this concept of DevOps and you've got certain roles within your organization. But when you introduce serverless and what you can do with it, and to Matt's point, being able to not worry about calling, your IT brethren and saying, hey, can you stand me up a Linux box because I need to deploy my code? You eliminate all that, right? Because now you can own everything from a configuration perspective and do what developers really do best, and that is write good apps, write good programs.
Andy, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I just add to what Matt and Phyllis, what I see is that having being worked in a lot of app development for a period of last 20 years, one thing which just fascinates me is that today, even if any developer wants to develop something, development is just not about you writing some piece of code and testing it, right? You require whole of ecosystem, starting from IDE. Today, without having anything, I can be anywhere else. I can launch a Cloud9 kind of an IDE in AWS Cloud, which would help me to write my code. The IDE integrates with the backend, CI/CD pipeline, everything, and then I could actually write my code. It could be I could invoke it from a REST API using API Gateway. It's all about configuration. I could have an event-based mechanism. I can use Event Bridge where I could actually use an one event invoking my API, and then I've got host of monitoring tools, and then my CloudWatch alarms, logs, X-ray tools, and a lot of third-party tools which are available with the click of a button. So that to make a production grade API today, it takes from months. We have reduced that to days, literally days, right? Even if I'm doing a a small proof of concept demo to one of my customers, I'm sure that the function I wrote can actually is production grade, because typically the amount of time developers used to spend previously is just not about writing the code, because we have to make sure that whether did I allocate proper, whether I have right sized my JVM, or did I have proper heap being allocated for this function? Do I have a proper caching mechanism is available? Am I properly logging the logs? Do you have any monitoring? A lot of time goes now. Now you can write a function. I can write, say, for example, simple custom function I want to write. I can just develop that function. I know that it will scale depending upon my scale goals. It is reliable. It is a production grade application. You don't have to previously you develop something. It has to go through testing. You have to do sizing, database sizing, application sizing, memory sizing, host of process before you can call this as a production ready. I think that's where the value of serverless comes. Serverless is just not about you writing some Lambda functions, right? People think serverless means a Lambda. Serverless is just not a Lambda, because basically serverless is a technology which would take you from all this, as I told, I'm using the same word, like these things, what you do, they are not truly differentiating you from your competitors. What differentiates you is the APIs you write, the core of your product.
Couldn't agree more. And I'll piggyback off that real quick. So one other thing too, in terms of the way we were developing this product, it also dawned on us that, to Gandhi's point, we can do skunkworks, POCs relatively fast and fail fast and realize real quick, versus going through that whole traditional rigmarole of standing up servers, getting QA involved, getting testing, all this other stuff. You can really do quick deployments, test kind of your theory of what you want to go develop in a short amount of time, months versus days, hours, if you will.
Yeah, so in the couple of projects I've been involved with, I noticed a couple of things on this point. One is you can deploy with, feeling fairly good about security, as long as you, follow the appropriate best practices as you build out your environment, which are pretty straightforward. And then but the second thing that I noticed is that this is a new challenge for developers. It's a different way of doing things. You can't bring everything together on your one system. And so, there is some challenges there. So let me ask you this, Philip, how do you think your teams are doing now that you're pursuing down this path, fast and furious?
I think it's been a great success. So the product that I mentioned a couple minutes ago, it's out in the wild. It's being fully adopted. We're selling it to our clients. It's proven to us, from an architecture perspective, security perspective, engineering, the whole gamut, that we can build really robust products. We can still have traditional integrations back to let's say the main system that it needs to connect with and keep track of all the data and so forth. So for us, it's really proven out, and the teams, our teams, are definitely drinking the Kool-Aid. They see the value. They understand that there is a lot of more speed to market availability to them now than they had yesterday, and that really resonates with us, because if you go back to tracking velocity and so forth with your teams, when you jump into something like this, you see a lot of those quick wins right out of the gate, which has been an eye opener for us. And so right now, if you take what the product we just launched, we're actually building a brand new platform from the ground up. It's a greenfield platform, and rather than having some integrations back and forth to kind of this main monolithic system, we're actually doing 100% cloud native and using serverless along the way.
Yeah, I mean, our teams, we've been on this journey for a little over a year now, as we get more experience in serverless and just the cloud native development in general, we've taken a lot more advantage of automation. We're doing, infrastructure as code across the board. It's enabled us to get into, closer and closer to CI/CD. Like, you always want to get closer to there, but now we're able to do it in an automated way, and those are kinds of things that we, that were harder for us in our, in our previous development styles and our previous infrastructures. And so we've, as we've gotten more cloud native, we're really able to take more advantage of those kinds of things.
definitely.
Awesome. So let's move on to a second poll. So Jill, if you don't mind bringing the poll up. I was just noticing a hawk flying around out my window, and it was distracting me. There are chickens out there, and I don't want the hawk to get my chickens. So, but I don't need to run out. I think they're going to be fine.
Protect those chickens by all means. We've got the second poll is up.
Yeah. So, are there any barriers to your organization adopting serverless? So, what types of challenges do you feel you might have, if any? I'm very interested in hearing people's thoughts on this.
Yeah, because we definitely lived it.
Okay, looks like we have everybody who voted who's going to vote. So I'm going to close it. And there are your results.
All right, so kind of distributed fairly evenly.
Yeah.
A third of the people, no barriers. Third of the people have a series of challenges. Interesting. Yeah, I think the monolithic application challenge is probably the most important to overcome, because really it requires re-architecting to fully embrace serverless. Although, Philip, if you don't mind, you all took a slightly different approach, right? Like, you were able to find a piece to carve off, and you mind talking about that just briefly?
Yeah, definitely. So, when we looked at this app that we were going to build and the problems we were trying to solve with the app, it couldn't stand on its own, and we certainly didn't want to build, a brand new database for this app just to support the app and what its functions were behind the scenes. We knew we had to have a fully integrated solution back into kind of our core. And so we actually looked at this as a kind of a hybrid approach. We're using stuff like React front end that's being stored out on S3 buckets. We're using Node.js on the serverless side with Lambdas. And then we've got your kind of your traditional PHP monolithic app that it communicates with. And so, we were building, REST API endpoints. So that way, when folks are out in the field using the app, either offline or online, because it had both capabilities, when that stuff needs to sync up back to kind of the main application, we needed to have those integration points there. And then to your point, Mike, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to re-architect anything. If anything, we wanted to leverage a lot of that pre-existing tech that we knew we could without having to go and tear down certain things or expose necessarily new APIs, because we already had APIs ready to go. We needed to retweak those to support this new product. And I don't know, Matt, you want to provide a little bit more color there?
Just really dialing in on that microservice approach. And we didn't want to we're now on our second journey where we're building a whole new platform, serverless from the ground up, but we knew we couldn't start there, and we needed to kind of take, something like a microservice and be able to kind of test the waters there and get familiar and get our foundation in this kind of cloud native development. And, we're expanding from there.
Yeah, that's great. So in this journey, what are the main challenges you faced? Like we listed a few there, monolithic application, et cetera. What specific challenges did you all face, and how did you overcome those?
So it was interesting. I remember when Matt and I were in so many of these kind of architectural product reviews, understanding the scope, what really product vision was, and afterwards, we knew that we were going to be using, like I mentioned before, a lot of the AWS services. We really didn't have an idea if we were going to use serverless. We were interested in it. To Matt's point, microservices was definitely on the forefront of our mind. But it really dawned on us that we don't really know the AWS lingo. We know enough to be dangerous. We can Google it just like everybody else on this panel can, and as well as the folks listening in. But we knew that we had to understand it from more of a technical perspective and really understand what all the services do and how they play a role. So that way, when we're bringing on new team members, we can talk the talk and let them understand exactly what they need to be aware of as well. So our big thing was we wanted to emphasize on training, and with that, let's go get some certification. So Matt and I, right after the product started, in terms of the development efforts and so forth, it dawned on us we need to go get certified. Let's understand what it takes to be an AWS cloud practitioner, and let's look beyond that. Let's look for solutions architect. Let's look for DevOps, those sort of things. And not only that, once we do that, that was our opportunity to more or less evangelize to the rest of the engineering group that if we can do it from our level, you can do it, right? And let's start trickling that down. Let's show the value of all this cool tech we're about to go build, and let's get them on a journey from a career perspective, from a personal development, to really own and understand what it takes to work in the AWS world, and not just Google things, but really understand what it takes to build certain things and integrate to certain components within AWS. And so as a leadership team, Matt and I got certified, and then it was from then I think the light bulbs were going off that we're all in on this. And if you're either on the train or you're off, and lo and behold, everybody's on it. And it's been really kind of an eye opener for both Matt and I don't want to speak for you, Matt, but it's been an eye opener for me, because I would say right now, if someone doesn't have that certification, it's on their quarterly objective to go get it. And I would say right now, my entire engineering group, 98% of the team since we started this last project are all AWS certified, with some that are already looking for their next certification. So, I think we've done a good job communicating how we wanted to evolve as an organization, especially an engineering organization, and the tech we were wanting to get into. And as part of that, we wanted to make sure we opened up the doors to our engineers from a career development, personal development, whatever you want to call it, to go and encourage them to get their certs. So that way, when they're opening up Jira tickets, they know that confidently, I know how that service works. I know what I need to go be building, because I've got kind of that breadth of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, and it gives us just a common language across the company to be able to, talk intelligently about what the kind of high level services are, we're all using the same namespace. It's all the Amazon, namespace for our terms. And it just really gives us that common language. And that was really our kind of our foundation to get started. I think, some of the learnings that and things we've had to overcome, like you asked, Mike, is, so many of these, to really take advantage of all the serverless functionalities and things that are provided by Amazon, you really have to kind of get familiar with an asynchronous workflow. And, in our traditional development, almost everything is synchronous, right? You have one, and maybe it's even a monolith where it's one set of code is doing everything. And to really take advantage of the serverless, you're going to be handing things off. So you're starting a job, you're kicking off like a workflow with a step functions, or you're utilizing SQS or SNS and all these things that are asynchronous. And so for us, it's been a challenge to kind of think asynchronously, as well as, it's not so hard maybe on the back end, but when you get to the front end, no longer is it instant feedback for the user. You may now have a spinner or a puller, or you're utilizing WebSockets or different things behind the scenes. And it's, we've had to learn how to kind of readjust our UI to match that asynchronous workflow of the data behind the scenes. And that, that's been a challenge, but we're working through that. Another area for us that's been a challenge to work through is in the DevOps. So we had a DevOps team, and their focus has been on more of the kind of traditional monitoring and provisioning and doing all that. And now that we're infrastructure as code, a lot of that infrastructure code is developed by the developers. So they need to know more about networking and security and all those kinds of things, because they're writing the code that's building our infrastructure. And then for our DevOps team, they're having to get comfortable with developers, going out and being working in the areas that they're traditionally stronger in the security and in the networking and all of that. And so kind of learning where DevOps goes or how it evolves as our teams, even like in a DR strategy, that's changed for us, because it's, there are, point in time backups of your databases and those things, but you can design your infrastructures to be, fault tolerant and highly available. So the DR is less of someone now needs to be woken up in the middle of the night and go handle this task, and here's the documented process, but it's you're building that resilience right into your application and into your infrastructure. And that takes everyone, the developers and the DevOps team and everyone, to kind of holistically come together. And so we're learning where those responsibilities lie and who's, who can help with what. It's been an interesting journey, but we're working through those kinds of things.
Maybe I'll quickly add add some other points to what Matt said. I think one of the important things when you're starting the serverless journey is to choose the right candidate for your serverless application. You need to see, like, it could be a monolithic application. You might have a lot of bad jobs, or you might have some functions which is having a lot of external integrations. That function is making some 10 different API calls called some different services. So you need to see, like, when you're starting any serverless, first pick up the right candidate. Like maybe if you are experimenting something with serverless, pick up something which is not having too much critical business impact. And then at the same time, it is not that nobody's using that function anytime. So you need to be a right balance of something which is being used moderately, but it is having less business critical impact when you're starting your journey, just when you're trying something. Second important thing is that don't look from a traditional way of doing a function. Just think like, can I look it differently? For example, I was seeing one of the customers talking like, just take a simple example, when somebody places an order, you are actually doing the credit check of the customer, you are actually sending an email to customer, you are actually sending the order to some backend SAP system, you are doing inventory check. Do you have to do all the things at the same time? There are some things which I can offload to different functions. They can work at their own pace. It doesn't really depending upon I can still place an order and then leave the task of sending email to different function. I push a message to some queue, and then other servers will pick up that message from the queue and then send the email. Or I can pick up do inventory check through different service. For some reasons, inventory check fail. Inventory is not there. I need to back order this order. Maybe I can push another message, another queue, another service will actually take the order to back order. Like, basically look differently from don't try to model same monolithic into serverless. Basically what you do is you're actually moving the problem from one place to another place. Then moving from serverless, try to break down the function, see like what you can offload. Something which you're doing synchronously in the past, you are doing it for some reasons, but you can actually do it for asynchronously. There's something which you are actually being invoked by API, obviously can make it, whether can I make it more event based. So look for, I think that you need to do this on a case by case basis, look at each problem, decompose it, and then look for the areas of where we can actually truly leverage a serverless.
And we've definitely learned that as we've gone, right? Like, we started out very simple, and we would try to kind of fit things into the synchronous flow and have Lambda functions that stay active and do polling. Well, that's not what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to kick off a job and wait for another trigger asynchronously down the line to pick back up that workflow. And so learning how to do those, and we've definitely evolved, and we're getting more comfortable in that as we've gone, and we're taking more and more advantages of all the serverless technologies out there. Once you start to get your foundation and get a little bit more comfortable with handling those asynchronous workflows, that's good stuff.
Maybe I forgot to add one more point there. Sorry, maybe I'll interrupt you, but one important point I forgot to add. One of the important things when you start serverless is pick up the right framework. It could be SAM, LAMP framework. It could be Amplify, or it could be some third-party framework like a serverless or Apex, this kind of framework. So one of the important things is choose the right framework, because when you have the right framework, it will come up with the right tools. Then it makes your life easier when you actually go to serverless journey.
Definitely. And one other thing I wanted to mention too is what serverless is not. It's not your lift and shift alternative by any stretch. If you're going into serverless and looking at AWS services and so forth, get that lift and shift mindset out, because that's not what serverless is good for. It's good for, to Gandhi and Matt's point, it's looking at business logic. What are you trying to solve from a business perspective? Are there things that need to happen behind the scenes that maybe your end user doesn't really care about at that point in time, or the application doesn't care about, or maybe it does, right? So keeping that on the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about this, don't look at your monolithic app and say, I'm going to move all this to serverless, because that's not the right strategy, because we're living it right now. We're definitely a hybrid organization where we still have a monolithic app that's PHP. It's got APIs, it's got a robust backend, data warehouse, that whole sort of thing. But at the same time, we've got products and apps that are leveraging AWS technology. Some of it's using serverless and so forth. So that's also something I just wanted to share, because I know a lot of people out in the industry are always looking to do this quote unquote lift and shift to AWS and kind of using those terminologies of serverless and this, that, and the other, which doesn't really resonate with us because that doesn't make sense. It's not what it's intended for.
Finding the right thing that has business importance, but it's just, it's also small enough that, and you can be agile and learn and explore and find your way into there and get familiar with it. Just like Gandhi was saying, just you got to find, it's got to be important because it's got to matter. You have to deliver on the solution. But that was the key for us.
Yeah. So listening to what Gandhi was saying about the event model transition, it's one of the challenges of microservices architectures, regardless of serverless, is this getting comfortable with consistency eventually, because that's really what we're talking about. Is you're not going to be, we're not doing a monolithic relational database where you're ensuring consistency all the time. You have to embrace this idea that some things are going to be out of sync for a short period of time, and you have to design, to fill up your point, the front end to handle that case, right? To be able to deal with the fact that maybe you don't have all the orders on the order list yet, or whatever that might be. So that's the biggest challenge for me, because I come from that relational, always consistent world. I've been in this industry for a long time, so that's what I'm comfortable with. So microservices always, I've struggled with that. Now with the event model stuff, I've always worked with workflows and those in the applications I've built. So this idea of working and event-driven is actually quite comfortable for me. So, I do have some challenges and some some benefits for my own personal career moving forward. And I'm sure all of us bring something similar. So I wanted to go to an audience question. Give me a second. So Jill, there was someone in the audience that had a question. Do you want to run with that one?
Yeah, we do. Shreyvan, I have unmuted you if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Yeah. So I feel like in the past with servers and and databases and things, there was a little bit of a structure to what we are managing and how things work together. I feel like that visibility of these things working together is starting to become a bit hard, because there's a lot of Lambda functions out there, a lot of microservices out there, in Fargate, and it's to get a good visual picture of what do we actually have out there to manage is becoming harder. And like who talks to whom, and when something is going wrong, like how do we debug? I'm trying to kind of figure out how do you get hands around it. Just to give you a background, we are using Lambda, we are using Fargate, we are using S3 RDS. But it's still in the early stages, and my goal is to actually push it further. But I'm trying to help, how do we overcome these initial challenges, both in sort of a design and really knowing what's going on, and also on the managing side, so that the teams, embrace this more and more going forward. That's kind of what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we all want to jump in, but one of the things that we found is we're definitely spending a lot more time, reviewing diagrams. So we're using Lucidchart, and we're using a tool called Cloudcraft. And these, Lucidchart has this great plugin to where it can go out and scan your Amazon account. And if you're if you're using the best practices with Amazon is that you're using a multi-account infrastructure. So you've got that segmentation across each application, or each developer has their own account. Then you can use these tools to have them scan your account and do a drawing. So it'll show you the infrastructure drawing. But we find that we have to definitely break down those flows more. So as we use, we're starting to use a lot more step functions or SNS queues, SQS, those kinds of things. And we end up documenting the workflow of, this is, it starts here and it triggers this. And then this whole process is happening while we're waiting on the other side asynchronously, with a WebSocket or with polling or something to have these happen. So we definitely find that we're using Lucidchart or Visio or those kinds of drawing tools a lot more, and some of them can also integrate to your Amazon account to help kind of discover what you've built and see if it lines up with what you think you're doing. But just, yeah, we're spending a lot, we don't, since we're all working remote, we're not doing this on the whiteboard. We're doing it all like in screen shares and Lucidchart and those kinds of tools.
And then on top of that, from an operational kind of governance perspective, we've got application performance monitoring tools that plugs right into our Amazon account so that, to Matt's point, we can see it architecturally what's going on. But if we want to see kind of a live, real-time, what's going on from, Lambda functions to services integrations and so forth, we've in the past have used a handful of tools. We've thus consolidated since then, and using one kind of monolithic APM tool to look at kind of everything that's going on within our accounts and a lot of the services that we're leveraging.
So can you tell me what is the monolithic? What is the tool you're using?
It's called New Relic.
New Relic. Okay. All right.
Maybe just add to what Matt and Philip told. Another important thing is that maybe where you structure your teams with the whole serverless and microservices, the way you look at the teams is all changing to make it more easily manageable. Like you are structuring your APIs, your Lambda, your functions around a specific business functions, then have that dedicated team who manages that. Just to give an example, you could have an order API team which manages all orders. You could have some inventory API team. You could have some payments. You could have some catalog. These teams, they manage that service. They are responsible for that. So when you actually divide them, depending upon the need, it could be one of the approaches. You can divide them functionally. It becomes easy for you to manage the interaction with. Now you know that, okay, this order team, you know that only thing you have to worry about is what is my endpoint. If at all you are having an inventory service, the order service team has to only worry about what is the API's inventory team is exposing to me. You don't have to really worry about all the behind the scenes of inventory because you are only communicating through the either API call or through some message. So that way the way you manage your service becomes easier because you are putting a boundaries like, okay, this is what my team does. This is what order API team does. This is the interfaces they're having. Now your communication, you are thinking only in terms of API calls or messaging. You are not really worrying about what is the data store that is having, what is the the technology. Are they writing in Node, .NET, or Java? You don't have to really worry about that.
Yep. And Matt, I don't know if you wanted to touch on Control Tower and kind of the way we set up that and guardrails and so forth. That also kind of lets us know from a developer perspective, if we give a developer access to set environments and so forth, we've got billing that lets us know how much they're doing, when they're doing it, those sort of things to help us understand what's happening within our AWS accounts as a whole. But Matt, I don't know if you wanted to, if that has any relevance to this, but I think it does.
Yeah, I mean, we found like, one of the best practice from Amazon is to, kind of use this multiple account flow. And so we use a tool that they provide called Control Tower. And so this gives us like a single point of entry. We have a single sign-on integration with our identity provider that we use for all of our single sign-ons. And from within that, we can easily give members of the dev teams access to their own sandbox accounts within Amazon or within these team shared accounts. It really kind of helps limit the blast radius, if you will. If someone did get into one of these accounts, they can only get into that one account, for that developer or whatever. But there's, within these, we get, access into the, to the budgets and what kind of features they're using. We can put out guardrails, like Philip mentioned, that say, you can only use these regions or these services within your account. We've definitely found those to be helpful.
Yeah, so Gandhi, are there any other tools that you would suggest that AWS offers to help some of these challenges?
Yeah, we have, in terms of, we have the, for example, if you're using some frameworks like Amplify, and then SAM that provides you a way to start developing your serverless applications. And if the question is more on how do I know, like there are a lot of different components involved, how do I know my end-to-end, the debugging, everything flow, I think we have tools like X-Ray, which would help you to see the how the starting from API 1 call to how it is goes to the till database, different function calls. You can actually trace them. You can measure the time it is taking at each stage. So there are some of the tools I could. Apart from that, we are having a lot of third-party tools like as Philip was in Neuralink, or we are having Datadog. This kind of third-party tools which you can integrate, which would give you a good visibility into your the way your functions, all the integration mechanism. Apart from what we have in the Lambda, you can use CloudWatch monitoring, CloudWatch logs, CloudWatch events to monitor and then see what is actually going on in the application.
Awesome, thanks, Gandhi. So Jill, do we have another question out there in the audience?
We do. I have one from Ranthi. Let me unmute Ranthi. Can you? Maybe his microphone isn't working. Let me just read the.
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
Yeah, he says AWS Lambda is great and it has evolved nicely compared to other cloud platforms, and it also runs now in VPC. He says, I believe it's suitable to event-based use cases and may not fit for those microservices which need to communicate directly to other microservices. And I know AWS Lambda can scale well. However, can it provide some of these microservice patterns, such as circuit breaker, cloud slide discovery, etc.?
That's client-side discovery, right?
Client side, yes. I can't read very well. Sorry.
That's all right.
So we do use. We find ourselves using more and more. Making use of the step functions. So they're like a state machine, for being able to design a workflow that is a whole series of Lambdas, right? So, and these can have manual steps within them, or they can just be chained up. So, if you look into the step functions, that is, that's one of our ways of kind of taking these individual Lambdas. We're still writing the Lambdas so that they do one specific thing, but then we chain them together in a whole big workflow using step functions. And sometimes there's SQS or SNS involved in there as well, but it allows you to kind of take all those little individual features or functions and put them into a bigger workflow, and they can handle things like if it errors or it fails out, how can you catch that and maybe respond in a certain way or roll it back in a way? But definitely take a look at the step functions. It definitely is a good way to kind of handle some of those things.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, the question is more on how do Lambdas in more of a REST API fashion. One of the things you should really look into is our API gateways, which is specifically designed where you can invoke a Lambda function through REST API. Like you could have an API gateway, you could use API gateway for a host of things. One of the powerful services which you can use even for WebSockets communication, it is having a built-in authentication mechanism. You can integrate your API gate with a cognitive pool, or you can both, or you could have your own custom authorizer, or you could have an IAM integration. And then another important thing is that this API gateways could have multiple ways. You could make it an edge-based. For example, you might be having a global application API running in across globally. You might want to have an edge optimized, like where if people from West Coast are accessing, they will access the API which is closest to them. People from East, they will access from East Coast, like server closest to them. The API gateway is one mechanism where you can use it to build this microservices patterns of having a REST or HTTP-based communication between services. Another important service where you can look into is AWS App Mesh. So basically, App Mesh is a service. This provides an application level networking. For example, if you see any modern application is composed of thousands of hundreds of services. Each service is built using multiple types of infrastructure. Some of them could be Lambda, some of them could be Fargate, some of them could be on EC2 also, right? So as this number of services grows within application, it becomes difficult to see like where exactly the location of error, how you are actually rerouting the traffic and everything. So App Mesh makes it easy to run these services and then provide a consistent visibility and then the network traffic control of all the services.
Awesome, thanks, Gandhi. So let's go to a final poll, and while we're throwing that poll up there, I wanted to mention that we do have a handout with suggestions from Gandhi, Matt, and Philip on places you can go to learn more about serverless and resources they use to help them move the ball forward in their serverless projects. Jill, let me know.
Yep, I'm going to close the poll right now. I think you're going to like the answers.
0% less likely. Awesome. We did a good job, guys. Look at that, 75% more likely. Excellent. I'm glad we were able to help there. So just as a final, I'm going to throw this out there as a final question for all three of the panelists. So any advice, like quick advice, as people are looking for resources or moving forward?
Matt, I don't want to steal your thunder because you got me get on the serverless stack. So.
Yeah, I mean, for us, really, it was, kind of being aware of, once we kind of learned that what serverless was and what it meant, and it's not just the services, but it's like the mentality. We kind of, for me, it was looking for tutorials in code, and we found one called the Serverless Stack. It's like serverlessstack.com. It's on the handout, but this is a really in-depth tutorial to get you into the serverless. It uses the serverless framework and deploys API gateway and lambdas and a React front end that's hosted serverlessly with CloudFront and S3. And so we've used that across our whole company as a way, to get into, get hands-on, because that was, you can go out and get your training and get your certification, but until you get hands-on, it doesn't really stick. And so that serverlessstack.com, and then there's a number of podcasts out there. There's a really good one called Serverless Chats, where they really, every week it's learning about all the new stuff in serverless, and those are some of the things that we use to keep up, because it's constantly evolving and changing. And there's, even as we've started, things that you couldn't do, you can do now. It's like every week there's new services or new additions, new features. And so trying to find some resources to keep up on what's available and what's evolving. That's, serverless chats and a newsletter called Off by None have been really good for us.
Yeah, and to piggyback that serverless stack tutorial, both Matt and I took that. And since we took it last year, it's literally evolved as AWS has evolved. Going back to that concept of, if you're getting into AWS, you've got to be agile. Well, this serverless stack has evolved in such that, they're using CDK now. They're using a lot newer technologies than when Matt and I took it. And it's one of those things where it's a great resource for your team. And I would encourage, as you make investments with your products and so forth, you also have to make an investment with your team. And so, that goes along with supporting them for certifications, supporting them on taking some of these tutorials to really get them to understand, versus just paying for, someone to come out and do a week-long session of what serverless means. Getting this hands-on is going to be a real eye-opener for a lot of your engineers looking to get into this.
Yeah, and we've really used our solutions architect. That is, we have our Amazon account. We have an account rep and a solutions architect. And we've really made use of them too. We have, regular meetings with them, and we ask them a lot of questions. And it's typically more around the line, we have this problem, and they'll point us in the right direction. And we've had a really good luck with a few different solutions architects that are provided by our Amazon team as well. So, we make use of them. They're there for you as well.
Good point.
Just to add to that, some of the other resources I can recommend is when you actually want to start serverless journey, we have some of the good serverless workshops which are there in the AWS. I have provided the links in the handouts. They're really designed where it gives you end-to-end perspective of serverless, and and then they give very detailed instructions where you can just take them, you can go through them, you can make, get your hands dirty on the serverless. Another avenue for you to get your serverless is that AWS has got immersion days where we do this with our partners, like Synergy, where we can partner with them and then conduct a half a day or 1 day immersion day, which deep dive into serverless, where you can choose set of your teams who actually want to be in that immersion day. You get a hands-on experience by doing through it will be mix of your sessions as well as hands-on labs. By end of the immersion day, you would have got a very good idea on what is serverless is all about, how we can use this, and then maybe you can start experimenting with that. Third is that we are having a set of specialists within AWS. Like if you want to require a deep expertise on AWS serverless, it could be API Gateway, it could be Lambda, AppSync, or any other specific thing you want, please reach out to us. We would provide you all the required guidance and help on maybe reviewing your architectures or providing you a roadmap or a direction on how we actually go about solving your challenges and how you can actually effectively migrate from your monolithic world to a serverless.
Awesome. So with that, we're near the end of time, but I want to encourage everyone to reach out and connect to Philip, to Matt, to Gandhi. They all have great information. I know there's a lot of questions we weren't able to get to. We're happy to answer those after the webinar. Like I say, you can reach out to us directly, or we will also try to compile some answers to the open questions and get those out to you as well. I want to thank the panelists, Philip, Matt, Gandhi. Thank you very much for this very engaging conversation. I enjoyed it. I already knew most of what was going on, and it still was interesting to me yet again. So I think the audience who mostly has stayed on also felt the same way. So that's awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.